Hello there, this is the Killer from Realm with a special informational video this time. With me I've got four very knowledgeable people from the PA community, and we're going to talk tonight about the differences between Total Annihilation and Planetary Annihilation, the differences between Supreme Commander 1 and Planetary Annihilation, and last but not least we're going to talk about the current competitive scene in Planetary Annihilation. Our experts on Total Annihilation will be Greppy. Say hi, Greppy.
Hello.
And obviously Liquius, who played a lot of TA Spring.
Hello.
Our expert tonight on Subcom is Knight, who is very famous for his Black Ops mod.
Yep, right here.
And last but not least, we have tournament winner and all-around expert on competitive playstyle, Neptunio.
Good evening.
We'll quickly move on to our first topic, which is the differences between Total Annihilation and Planetary Annihilation. The floor's for you, Greppy.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to apologize in advance. I am sick, so I might cough or, I generally sound crap. So I'm going to start with the similarities. I think there's more similarities than differences. The first obvious one is the resource system. The resource system is the same, essentially. It's the same kind of streaming resources, metal points, energy plants, storages, that kind of same kind of thing. The units are the same, essentially. There's a vehicle plant, something similar to the K-Bot lab, and there's an air factory. The only changes in this part is that there's orbital units, which have a new kind of factory where, orbital fighters, satellites, and the ability to transfer between planets. There's nothing like Krogoths or X-Bots, which was a mod, but same kind of thing.
Microphone muted.
What was I going to say about units? There isn't right now in the beta or late alpha, whatever you want to call it, a massive selection of units. The only units that are there is direct upgrades. So, for example, a flash tank in Tech 1 has a direct upgrade which has like two turrets, for example. So imagine a flash tank with 2 turrets. Pretty lethal. So there's only one faction as well, so don't expect, arm and core units. Everybody has access to the same units.
So how does that change the gameplay, that everyone has the same units? Killer here.
Well, of course, the major thing is that, there's not as many units you have to kind of counter, and for example, if a core sumo came on the field, your probably correct response would be something with an annihilator turret or something similar, so you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
So countering stuff would be easier, you'd say?
Yeah, way easier.
Also, balancing the game would be easier.
Yep, that as well.
Yeah, I believe the developer stated that that was the primary reason that factions are expensive, because you have to balance them. And they will have factions only in name, I believe. Is that correct?
Actually, I just want to step in and say that one of the larger costs for factions is actually artwork, both in terms of the actual cost and time.
So artwork is a very expensive thing to do in game development. Cool. Any more differences, Grab?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head, to be honest. Units wise, there's not that many. I mean, the resource system's the same. The units, there's just right now in the current state of the game, there isn't that many unique units. Which TA has a massive abundance of. I think there's like each side has like 100 or something units, including buildings, of course. Static defense still plays quite a heavy role, the same as TA did. Again, there's not many turrets you can pick from, and the turrets that are there are direct upgrades.
What about the way energy is generated? I believe I haven't played TA myself, but wasn't there different ways to get energy in the game, or?
Well, energy was all generated the same way. It was all, you just build a building, or actually no, there's no geothermal buildings. In TA there was gas vents, or on metal planets, which are the same as metal planets in PA. They were kind of like cities or something. They had exhaust vents. You could put a geothermal power plant over the top to generate power, but that was built by the construction robot, so that's kind of like a in between advanced and basic. They weren't
Okay.
built too often. But in TA, there were solar panels you could build at Tech 1 and wind farms. Right now, there's only one source of power generation for PA, which is just a basic power generator. The power generator could be built on land and sea, so you don't have to build a separate unit for that, like what was it called, the tidal generator. There are orbital solar generator things, which are the current highest method of generating energy. That's the only different kind of building to generate power.
Do we know what gas giants will do? Because there currently are no gas giants in the beta, but they will do in the future. Knight, do you know how gas giants work?
Current talk is that you'll be able to essentially build a space station that sucks up He3 from the gas giant and turn it into copious amounts of energy. What that means in relation to the current and solar collector and current planet-based generators, we don't know yet.
Okay.
Another massive thing actually for TA was that weapons and radar and stuff cost energy, and sometimes a lot of energy. Right now, weapons don't cost energy. There is no, there isn't a laser turret you can use. Well, there are laser turrets. Sorry, the defense towers are called laser turrets, but they don't cost energy. Radar costs energy right now, but I don't know if advanced radar costs more than the basic one.
There is an ammo system in the game that uses energy, and some units like bombers and the laser satellite do use it. I just don't think it has been refined to the point where it's been applied more widespread yet.
If that's the case, the energy cost for weapons isn't significant. In TA, you notice it when a laser you can't shoot until you have energy.
I think the only thing you've missed is metal makers and fabricators.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you explain that, Liquius?
Well, you convert energy into metal, and that's what you do when you don't have enough metal. But in PA you can't do that, so your only other option is to expand.
So that means that players have to expand a bit more, wouldn't you say? How does this influence gameplay?
Well, it means you've got to be a lot more aggressive with expansion and fight over resources more.
Doesn't mean that they're not going to add metal makers in. I don't know what the plan on that is. It's just not in the game right now.
General talk has been very negative towards metal makers, so at this point it's not looking very likely at all, to be honest.
What are some major arguments against it then, Knight?
Basically just that it gets to the point where it's very hard to balance. You either have it to the point where it's superior or where it's not worth the time. And if it's not worth the time, then why bother having it? And if you want a gameplay that's focused on combat and expansion and territory control, you don't want it to be effective, which takes away from all that. So at this point, it's not looking all that likely. It's something you'll definitely see in mods, I'm sure, but not as part, at least not for release, I would expect.
Okay.
I guess a way that you could do that would be, I know they have interplanetary implemented now in the beta. You could always have a planet that has no metal spots on it, so that you would have to use that metal production facility.
But if it's an effective alternative, then why use metal spots at all? Why not just build a compact small base you can more easily defend?
The point of metal fabricators is so that when you really don't have any more metal you can get, it's a really inefficient option, but it is an option.
If you don't have enough metal and you're being pushed back, that's kind of the point where you lose, though. It's really hard, like I said, it's really hard to get that middle ground where it works without, bringing any issues into the solution.
For me, at least, metal makers were a map choice. If there was a map you had that didn't have much metal on it, you were forced to use fabricators.
Okay.
Again, cool. PA is interplanetary, so you're not stuck on a single map where your strategy is influenced.
For me, it should be one of those things where if it's a bit of a stalemate and it's roughly balanced and you can't beat them, it's just a way of getting an advantage at a high cost.
Oh, wait a minute. There is another way of generating mass, which was really important in TA. That's reclaiming wreckages. I think I don't know how it doesn't seem significant in PA right now, but it might become.
Didn't the developers state that in one of the patch updates that reclaiming just got useful, has just started working or something, that they'll do some more work on it in the future, so it might become more important.
Go on.
They finally implemented wreckages so that they've actually, I think, they actually have they're actually useful and influence the battle. So I think the next step is to make them reclaimable.
What about... Sorry.
Go on.
What about natural objects? In PA you currently can't reclaim rocks and trees. Is that something that will happen in the future, or are the developers against that? And so, if yes, what are the gameplay implications of that?
From what I've seen, it's not been too much on this particular topic, but I think they're trying to steer away from reclaiming rocks and trees just because it tends to be very micro-orientated, and it's generally been one of the things that can really turn a game just like that. So in between the multiple maps and such, I think they're going to try and stay away from that level of reclaiming. I think they'll keep it for wrecks, and after a battle you want to go in and reclaim all the wrecks, but not so much that start of the game you're focusing on reclaiming all these little tiny rocks around you.
Ah, okay.
I think they might make it a feature, but I don't think they'll make it so that it's something you have to do.
So it's just something for a little extra then. Liquius, you played a lot of TA Spring. Are there some major differences between Spring and PA, or?
I pretty much cover them all with TA, really.
Okay, move on to the next topic. And now for the second part of this video, we are going to compare Supreme Commander 1 and Force Alliance Forever with Planetary Annihilation. Knight, what do you have to say about this?
Well, for me, Supreme Commander, or well, in this case, Planetary Annihilation takes a lot from Supreme Commander. In some ways, to me, I see it takes more things than from TA. But some of the key things we got is the strategic zoom. Admittedly, you can't quite see the whole map across multiple planets, or you can see even up to only half the planet, but you still have that full control on the zoom, which is really nice to see. You can go right out from seeing everything as the strategic icons and doing all the big picture stuff, and then going right in and precisely placing where you want your factories and laser defense towers. Beyond that, we also have large maps. Supreme Commander really kind of paved the way in these really large maps. Unfortunately, the gameplay wasn't quite optimized for anything over 20-kilometer maps, but the potential was there, and a lot of people did still have fun with that, so that's great. It's great to see that we're seeing not only these big planets, but we're seeing multiple planets all in the same air quotes map. Then we get into things that are a bit smaller, things like we're still seeing a lot of the same economy that we saw from Total Annihilation, back to the metal energy, using the extractor points, a lot of basic stuff.
There's still still differences in the economy, like for instance metal production facilities, like metal fabrication, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, in the original Supreme Commander, they played a big role to the point where they defined the metal game. There wasn't any territory control. You just built up these giant fabricator farms, and then you just fought wars with your economy. But in Forge Alliance, they shifted that so that territory control and taking those extractors actually mattered, much like how we saw the shift from the alpha to the beta, where that territory control really influences a lot about how powerful your economy is. Otherwise, it just gets down to specific numbers. The basic the founding concepts are still the same across all three games.
And numbers in PA are still up to change as we get close to release anyway.
Yeah.
So, any other similarities between Supreme Commander and PA that you'd like to talk about?
We also have the larger numbers. Total Annihilation was really good for its time in being able to field large amounts of numbers, but once we got to Supreme Commander and you could field up to 1,000 units at once on large 8-player maps, you could in theory have 8,000 units, assuming you could overcome some of the engine issues. And now with Planetary Annihilation, we're seeing that another big jump in potential. And although we don't know quite how the gameplay will set out in terms of what a standard unit count will be, we do know that we'll be able to go beyond what we could with Supreme Commander, and especially as time goes on and the engine scales with hardware improvements over the years, we'll see even higher numbers.
I believe, if I'm correct, there's no in-game set cap currently on number of units, right? It's just basically how much units can the server and your computer handle.
Currently, yeah, I foresee in the long term there will be a unit limit, air quotes again, but it won't be like StarCraft where you constantly run into that unit limit and you're battling with trying to get the right composition of that. It'll be much like Supreme Commander where unless you specifically set out to hit the limit, you won't hit it and you'll be able to work freely within it. And then, of course, as time goes on and we get better hardware, that limit will increase. But whether or not we'll actually be able to fully make use of it, aside from large team games, I don't think we'll see that in 1v1s kind of thing.
Okay, cool.
There are definitely some changes that kind of went on from Supreme Commander is in particular, the lack of upgrades and the lack of the third and technically fourth tiers. So now with PA, instead of building your factory and then just upgrading it to the next level and then forgetting about building the lower tier units, you actually have to build your basic factory. From there, build the fabricator, and then from that fabricator, you can build the advanced factory.
So does this change gameplay a lot, would you say?
It can. It depends really on the unit balance. If we see a return to the way the tiers are balanced from Supreme Commander, it'll change how you get there, but it won't change the overall gameplay tone. If we see more of a return to the basic and advanced setup from Total Annihilation, it will definitely feel like a very big change from Supreme Commander.
Okay, cool. You said upgrades. Are you referring to the commander upgrades there with that?
That is also where it applies as well. There is currently no upgrades for commanders or even units in general or buildings. There is some talk about alternatives for commanders. Nothing's been fully confirmed yet, so I don't really want to start into a whole rant about that, but there is potential for things for commanders to have that will help differentiate them, but they won't be upgrades.
So this differentiating commanders won't be happening in the match themselves, you're saying?
No, it'll be permanently assigned to different commanders themselves. So it won't be something that will change mid-match.
So before the match starts, you select your commander, and that's the commander you're running with. You can't change anything about them in the game itself. In PA,
yeah,
that is.
That's what everything's looking at. But that's what the current plan is looking like, at least.
Are there specific things you'd like commanders to actually do in PA?
I don't see any particular holes that need filling in that regard. It's always going to be a bit of a balancing act between ensuring that the commander is viable throughout the game, but not such that he can't ever be killed. So there's definitely lots of options that can be done. Things like stealth, variations of the D gun, or even alternate weapon types. There's definitely lots of options out there. It's just going to be about trying them out and seeing what works for the game.
Anyone else got some opinion on differentiating commanders? Or?
I think the upgrades idea is really good. Purely for the reason the Knight said, just making the commander viable for the entire game. In too many of the games that we've seen so far, the commander is used initially, but once you reach a 10-minute mark, it's just too risky to even use him at all, and he just sits in the middle of your base, either building Tech 1 structures or building Tech 1 defenses for himself.
So you'd be in favor of commander upgrades?
Yeah, I'd like to see him more like a chess queen than the chess king in the late game.
Ah, cool.
I think the biggest thing that will influence that is the final tier balance. Supreme Commander, you needed the upgrades because a T3 unit had more health and did way more damage than the Commander ever did. So even 3 or 4 could, even with the use of Overcharge, a small number of T3 units could wreck your Commander. So you needed those upgrades to keep them current. If we see a return to the way TA handled the different tiers, we might not need that as much. and it gets to the point where you can balance the commander to be more effective in the late, to be, or not so much effective, but just more well placed for mid to late game, and you won't have to worry about the imbalance early game because he's just one unit and he can still be overwhelmed. But it's really dependent on a lot of little things here and there.
I think the thing that you really want to have with the commander for the entire game is this feeling that I've got this unit that's incredibly powerful, but if he dies, he's going to lose me the game. As it is at the moment, you have that feeling in the early game, and you really feel like to get the most out of your army, you need to be using your commander in some way effectively. But in the late game, he's just simply a liability, and you just need to protect him. I'd rather see him for the whole game being this extremely highly valuable, extremely damaging, and extremely valuable unit.
Well, I think in the long term we'll see that come into its own in terms of expanding. Right now we've only just got into planetary stuff rolling, so it's still really rough around the edges and you don't need the commander to expand, but it's possible in the future that the only way to start on a second planet or to move to the moon will be with a commander, and just the way that the commander is the most efficient and fastest builder is a big part of that. Being able to survive if your opponent gets 3 tanks onto the planet with you, your commander can take those, but an engineer couldn't.
Yes.
But it's, as I said, very dependent on a lot of little things, so we'll have to see how the game evolves from beta.
Talking about planets, is there a significant difference between fighting on a flat map like in Total Annihilation and Supreme Commander and fighting on a sphere like in Planetary Annihilation?
To me, it's less so about the flatness and more so about the fact that you don't have a border. It's true that in some cases, particularly if we see Supreme Commander style beam weapons come back, that the curvature of the planet will play a part in things like range. But in terms of the overall gameplay, it's the lack of borders and how it loops around that can really, will really change up the gameplay.
Okay. In our next part, we will talk more about gameplay as we get into competitive gameplay. And now for the third and final part of this video, we're going to talk about the current and developing competitive scene in PA, and Neptunio is our expert on this. Let's hear it, Neptunio.
Yeah, so I thought that it would be a good idea to open with a short summary of what's happened so far in the alpha and the early beta in terms of the competitive scene. And then I thought I would open it to discussion on what people think maybe needs to be done in order to make this game into a competitive game. But to start with, let's have a look at the current scene. A lot of it's been community driven. We've had a few tournaments already. We've got a ladder set up already. But one of the main ways that you can, if you're a player that's just got into the beta or you're thinking about getting it and hoping to have some serious play with it, one of the best things that you can do is join the IRC chat that was set up as part of the ladder. Killer will be linking a few of these links underneath the video, I think, once it goes up. And so the top link should be the IRC chat that you can join. In there, you can go in anytime, ask for a 1v1, and you can be pretty sure you're going to be playing somebody that's pretty good. As I said, that was based on the Gentleman's Ladder. And the Gentleman's Ladder was basically implemented quite early in the alpha, as a lot of people were getting pretty sick of just playing random 1v1s with, obviously there's a lot of people that have just got the alpha, just trying it for 1 or 2 games and then putting it aside. The reason that people got together and did the Gentleman's Ladder was so that they could have a serious game with people that they know have put a few hours into it at least. Again, the Gentleman's Ladder will be linked below the video, but there has been a reset for the start of beta. The number 1 at the end of the beta was a player called Godder, and there should be a lot of competition to get the number 1 spot at the end of beta. Once the Gentleman's Ladder had been going for a little while, people started looking into maybe trying to host some tournaments. The first tournament was hosted as an invitational tournament. There were 8 players that were invited to play, and there was a prize pool offered as well of $75. The winner of that tournament was a guy called Gunshin. He won quite a few of the alpha tournaments. But the biggest thing that came out of that tournament was just the community backing behind it. All the prize money was put up by community members. All the videos were streamed by community members, and it was altogether a really big success. You can see a lot of those videos from that tournament and the other tournaments that have been hosted so far on pamatches.com. You can also see the tournaments themselves at pa-tournaments.com. All these links will be below the video for you to view at your own leisure. Since then, we had a few more tournaments, a couple of minor tournaments with no prize pool, and then we did have our first doubles tournament as well, which again was won by Gunshin and a guy called Cola Colin, who incidentally started up the Gentleman's Ladder. And then we had a King of the Alpha tournament at the end, which actually I won. Not to blow my own horn too much, but again, a lot of prize money was offered in all these tournaments. Overall, so far we've had $200 put up by community members alone just to sponsor these tournaments, and we've had a pretty good turnout. Overall, we've had probably around about 50, 60 unique players playing in these tournaments, and they haven't been advertised hugely. They've just been a simple post on the forums or simply put on the pa-tournaments.com website. People have signed up, put in their time, and got some really good casting games out of it. What I thought we could do next was just discuss the competitive future of Planetary Annihilation. Obviously, this game is quite unique to any other strategy game that's currently regarded as, say, an esport, air quotes, to as you would say. Games like StarCraft, League of Legends, Dota are all huge competitive games. They're all also extremely exciting to watch, and that's the reason that they have got such a tournament competitive backing. One issue that a lot of people may be bringing up with Planetary Annihilation is that it's completely different to any of these proven successful strategy games, in that it's very long-term thinking, very overarching strategies, perhaps more like chess than it is like speed chess. And I thought that maybe we could discuss a little bit what people think the competitive future of PA could be. Personally, I think there's a massive niche there for it. If you can just get a good bit of backing, get something rolling, you could really see this game explode competitively. What do you guys think?
I totally agree with you, mate. The community has really it's gone on its bike, I suppose, and started to support the competitive scene. And of course, as you said, there's been a big turnout already. I think that's only going to grow with the inclusion of the beta members. Does anybody know how many of the kind of competitive players from other games have come here?
I know that
I saw someone saw Blue Screen ISU come in from FA, sorry.
Yeah, played with him earlier, actually. Played pretty well for a brand new player. I know there's a lot of people from other games as well that are interested. I'm not sure how many of them have come from games like StarCraft and League of Legends, but certainly I think a lot of people from FA and Subcom and TA that were competitive in those games have come across.
Well, don't you think one of the major differences between those really big competitive games and PA is that in PA every map is procedurally and randomly generated, or slightly randomly. You can still say which planet will be where and what type of planet it will be, but you don't have, for instance, a very iconic map like Saturn's Clutch in PA. Every map will be random, so you don't have recognizable maps like that on which you can base complete strategies which will only work on that map or are specific for that map. How do you think this changes the game, or how does this change the scene more?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Killer, because all the tournaments that have been hosted so far have had a standard map attached to them. The map's been, because you can create your own planets in PA and then kind of customize them and then create them and then publish them, and then people can inherit the stats from them and make them themselves and then host games on them. And all of the tournaments so far, none of them have been hosted on random planets. It's always been, we're going to play on so-and-so planet with the following stats. Here they are, you can load it yourself, have a look, have a practice, and then we'll play. I do agree with the fact that there's not very many strategies that are going to be specific to certain planets at the moment, but I think as people make planets that are completely different, maybe a high metal planet, a low metal planet, a very small planet with a very big moon, you will see different strategies appearing for these different planets, and as long as we can standardize the planets that are used, I think that's certainly something that could become apparent in this game as well.
So it actually can work as long as the tournament is organized properly, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know if it's about proper organization so much as just having foresight to say we're not going to play on random planets.
Okay.
We also need to consider the fact that right now we have 2 to 4 units per factory, and over time we might see things where certain units will excel in certain areas, like an amphibious unit will do better on an island or river planet compared to, a giant mountain planet.
Ah, cool. But we probably won't see specific strategies like on Saturn's a front player does this and a back player does that. Are
I
you
don't know.
expecting
No.
something like that?
I don't think we'll see anything quite as rigid as that, but I think we'll definitely see certain trends and themes emerge based on planet or terrain types.
Especially on lava planets, because you're only limited to air and land. Metal planets, it's not confirmed, but you might be able to build metal extractors anywhere, so they're kind of a key resource.
And who's
That
to say
is
that?
about as far as from confirmed as one can be, considering the metal planets are also rumored to be giant space stations that can fly around and destroy planets.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, it was in the Kickstarter. Well, it was shared when they revealed the stretch goal, but they haven't really talked much about it since then. So it's definitely not confirmed either way. But to me it seems would be a very hard thing to balance, being able to build extractors anywhere and being a giant planet that can fly around and blow up other planets.
Well, you could
Definitely
have
right.
you could have specific structures on there you could take over, like specific artillery pieces or something on it, or anti-orbital structures that you can take over and activate if you, for instance, build power plants in specific spots. Then it activates the cannon for you or something like that. You can do stuff like that, but I can imagine that it's hard to balance a flying spaceship that has a dead laser. But still, it would be very cool for something to be in there. But back to competitive games, how Neptunio, how do you expect this competitive scene to develop with PA right now?
I think for me personally, I'd be happy with it just to keep going the way that it's going. All of those tournaments that I mentioned just before have all happened this month. So we've had more than one tournament a week on average. And it's obviously because it's an alpha, things are just completely wild. And patches are coming out thick and fast. Balance is questionable at best. And people are still getting behind it and trying to force it into this competitive scene. And I think that's just so great to see. For the future of the game itself, I'd love to see, like I said before, just standardization of planets. But I'd love to see some kind of backing from the Uber guys themselves, just to kind of give it a little push in the right direction, just so that we can start perhaps then going to sponsors and saying, look, we had this one tournament, it went really well. How would you feel about backing us for another tournament? But a lot of this comes from the excitement value of the game itself. If people are really excited to play it and play it competitively, that's great. But it's not the primary reason that a game gets competitive. The primary reason is because people love watching it and people love being a part of the community around it. And I think that has to be the future of PA.
So the future of the competitive scene in PA kind of lies on the shoulders of the casters, is what you're saying, and if it's enjoying to watch.
I don't know if it's going to be the caster's role to make a game exciting to watch. For me personally, I find it really exciting to watch, but it's not a hugely fast-paced game. I find it interesting to watch, possibly because I like watching the latest strategies and I like watching people playing the game and trying to figure out what they're doing. I'm not sure how approachable this game would be for a complete newbie. Although having said that, I think it actually would be really interesting to watch as a complete newbie.
It all depends.
I think
Sorry, continue, Knight.
I think a big part of it is going to be as they try and nail down the pacing and work with just in general like the tools spectators would use. Things like ChronoCam are great for that because you can just skip back right then and there and review something and review it and then go back. They've even got right now, I saw the other day, they got a 10-second back button so you can just go back 10 seconds to just review something real quick without messing with the slider or anything.
Yeah, and things like that kind of give me the impression that Uber are thinking about the watchability of the game, which is actually a really positive thing.
Also, things like split screens and more overlays would help casters being able to draw on the map so they can like draw stuff. And
oh yeah.
that would also actually help in team games being able to draw on the map, but we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves.
But it's just the fact that the game is so unique compared to every other game that's ever become remotely competitive. Yeah, I mean, even Knight earlier mentioned the fact that the planets are flat on pretty much every other strategy game, and then here we've got this spherical world, and on top of that we've got multiple worlds that you can fight over. Even just the fact that it is a sphere brings so much uniqueness to the game. Like, I don't know how many people know this, but when you try to move in a straight line on a spherical world, the units don't take a straight line route to get there. They go by what's called a great circle, which is the shortest distance to get there. It's like a circle around the planet that's not quite in a straight line. It's the reason that when you fly from London to New York, you end up going over Greenland, because the plane's taking the shortest distance route. Everything like that makes this game so unique and so interesting that I think that at the very least, it could get a small competitive backing behind it, and we could see some really exciting stuff coming out of it.
Oh, that sounds
Yeah, and I
really
really
exciting.
feel. Yeah, and I feel especially going forward, I think in particular post-release, this kind of ties into some theories I have for mods as well, but I think Uber needs to really be able to push that both like in the launcher and just in the game itself, saying, like, oh, hey, there's this tournament going on. Click here to jump into the cast to see the game that's currently being played at the moment, and doing things like that, and just really advertising it where players will see it. Not just, and obviously you need to get people from outside the game as well to look at it, but start with the people in the game and get them invested in that, and because you already know they like the game if they're playing it.
Just as a further thought, I know we've been talking a lot about these games and how the game looks and everything like that. If anybody out there is interested in just having a look at the game itself as a competitive unit, I would recommend going to ZaphodX's channel, ZaphodX1, youtube.com/ZaphodX1. Some of his recent videos have just been absolutely brilliant. He does a great job of casting them, and the level of play that we're seeing already at this stage in the alpha, or now beta, has just been so high that you see these incredibly skillful games taking place. And when you get two players that are really good going at it against each other, the game is just really, really exciting, because there's battles going on everywhere. The scale of the game is so big that you've got 5 or 6 confrontations going on around this whole planet constantly for the entire game. And it's like this massive tug of war between these two players, and then maybe one of them gets a nuke and nukes the other guy's power field, and that's the end. And that can be the sudden game ender for this huge dramatic game. I just find it so exciting to watch, and I just hope that people give it a chance, so that we can try and just see if we can make one of these massive scale strategy games as competitive as these micro-oriented little strategy games that we already see up there.
And on that note, I'd like to end the video. Thanks for your participation, Greppy.
No problem.
And obviously Knight.
Of course.
And the introspectives on competitive scene came from Neptunio here.
Thank you, Killer.
And Liquius had to leave. I'm the Killer from the Realm. Thanks for watching.